The Tracy Piper Show. Today we have David Puck, a good friend of mine who is an amazing artist. I met him in San Francisco, 2 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, I think about that.
Yeah. Right now you're back in the UK, but I'm just really excited to chat with you a little bit because I do feel like we have not like the same styles, but similar styles. But first, before we get into that, please introduce yourself, David. Tell everyone what you're about, and yeah.
Yeah, well, hello, I'm David, like Tracy said. Hi, Tracy, nice to see you. And yeah, my name is David Puck artist, and I do paintings like these ones, like colorful, abstracted portraits of queer culture and mental health. Those are the main themes I've been exploring, but it can diversify a bit sometimes. I do a lot of murals and public art as well. Yeah, and recently I've also been doing a series called Painterview where I interview the subjects that I'm painting while I'm painting them. So then we can get really deep into the subjects that are about these people's lives or about things that we're interested in and creativity. So it like makes total sense that we're doing this together now, because I feel like someday I will convince you to let me paint you and have you on my one too.
Oh my God, I'm ready. I mean, honestly, that show kind of inspired this show. I mean, I was watching you do it, and I think it's so powerful. You're giving voices to people, you know, who maybe wouldn't have a voice or get to tell the stories they're telling. And you're doing it through art. And I just like, when I watched you do that, honestly, I was like, oh, such a good idea. I could do that for artists. I'm going to do it. You gave me confidence.
Oh, I'm so glad. That's so great. I was actually thinking about introducing more of an interactive element into it too, because I think, so like you said, one of the big ideas behind it is like we're portrait painters. So what we paint is also about the people that we're painting.
Yeah.
So this was really about putting them more like front and center and letting people speak their own stories. And like, obviously that often happens behind the scenes, like we're meeting the subject and talking to them, but to have the audience see it and to have it directly connected with the work was like really important to me, especially when it comes to painting people who are of demographics and experiences that are so different to mine. It's like, this is always going to be my painting of you, but at least you can like speak for yourself too.
It's such a good idea. And like, that's the tough thing I feel like with portraiture. We both do portraiture, and we both do portraiture. I mean, you are queer. You identify as queer, correct? I'm not putting that in your face. I'm not putting that in your mouth.
Oh my God, you outed me. My grandma's going to be so disappointed.
So, I mean, but, you know, even with my work, you know, I do work about everyone. And that part of the reason I do that is because I grew up in a melting pot. I hate that word, but melting pot. And, you know, for me, it's important, like representation really does matter. And I know that I have this white skin, but like, if I have that platform and I can bring awareness to something, that's where I think the magic really happens. And not just awareness, but compassion, and to see yourself, you know, to see yourself larger than life or immortalized, I think is a very special gift. And that's kind of what you're talking about too. You know, you have this queer, you're giving a spotlight to queer culture, which traditionally hasn't had that, you know? So, I mean, I think, and what I like about that show and what you just said too, is like, because portraiture is very tricky. It's about the person, and yet it isn't, you know, it's like, and how do you know, like the separation of that or the connection of that is really tricky. And one of the ways I got around it was I did these like Frankenstein portraits. Like I would find eyes, a nose, a mouth, and make up the person so I could talk about the concept as opposed to the person. Because, but what I like about what you're doing is you're talking about the concept, and not just the concept, you're letting people tell that story. And I think that's, I mean, I think it's a great way to approach portraiture. I mean, how did you come up with that?
Thank you. Yeah, I've been really enjoying doing it. How did I come up with it? I think just thinking about, you know, like always wanting to move towards doing the things that I enjoy. And one of the experiences I've had, one of the things that's happened for me over the last year, even before quarantine, was I was not enjoying the isolation of painting so much. And I'm like, I have my introverted, want to be alone moments, and painting can be very meditative.
Yeah.
I'm not. I love people. I love socializing. I love experiences and traveling and meeting people and doing things. So when I got into painting really seriously, and it was like every single day in the studio, and I wasn't in a studio with other people, it was lonely. And I was painting people. And in some ways, like my being drawn towards painting people started to become this like expression of my loneliness, because I would make jokes about it on Instagram, like, oh, I don't have any friends, but look at all my painting friends. And I was like, oh my God, like that is a joke, but also it does cut a little bit too real. So I was like, for my own sake, just this is something that I want to do often and has now become my full-time job. So
Yeah.
it was a way to really integrate human connection into the work itself. Um, and I tried other workarounds too. And I think like this isolation is what draws a lot of people to visual art. But for a lot of people like me, it becomes one of its challenges. And that was one of the things that drew me towards murals and public art, like being out in the world, working with other people. It draws me towards collaborations, towards so many things that I do. Ultimately, comes back to this like human connection, because that's like what I see art as being. Like it's communication, it's connection. Sometimes there's a little bit of like me wanting to vent out my feelings, and it's a little bit therapeutic. But a lot of the
connection too. I mean, that is connection. And, I think, my last solo show before lockdown was called All I Need. And what it really was the need for connection. I was feeling kind of isolated. Early motherhood is really difficult. You're stuck like kind of in baby land. And All I Need was really about inviting friends and family over to paint them, to have those conversations, to have that connection. And now in the time of COVID, you can't do that. And so, I mean, that's one of the things I really like about that show that you're doing, a Painterview, because it one, you can see the relationship you have with the person on screen, but two, it's a great way to invite your viewer to know more about what it is in that. It's like you're doing two things here. You're making beautiful art because you're great at that. But yeah, telling that story, I think, is also one of the huge interesting things. I mean, that's the goal with painting, I think, for me and for you, is to tell a really good story, and make people feel seen and heard. So I think I applaud you. You're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, that idea of stories. I've been thinking about that a lot. And I was because the paint reviews are with sometimes other visual artists, but I try anyone that I'm interested in, or anyone that has a story. So there's been people that do improv, there's been authors, there've been the circus performers, and just all types of creative and different types of people. And a lot of one of the threads that ties these different like types of creativity together is storytelling and communication. And that's what we're all doing, but we're doing it in different ways and with different mediums. And I've really more and more been thinking about stories, like, or not just the stories that our work expresses, but the stories that we tell ourselves, like in terms of mental health, in terms of how we go about our lives and communicate with others. And that's been like a huge part of my work too, as well as what I want to say to people, but also what I'm trying to work out for myself is what is going on in here.
I feel like, I say this to Ashley, who I work with pretty closely at Boss Gallery. I'm always like, these shows, they're like masked in what everybody else is going on in the world, but they're really like mostly about what's going on in this world. And I try and make it universal, and I try and connect everything, but really it comes from this place. Like, when I think about my work, and I think about your work, it's about self-worth, because I think you and I both struggle with that a little bit, or a lot of it. But I think that also is what makes the work so tangible and real, because we understand that, right? And then that's why we invite other people into the world, and we kind of create this platform. And I think it's strong work, especially during this year, regardless of any other year. But to say like, okay, yes, this is hard. Mental health is hard. And to make it beautiful, I think is actually kind of revolutionary. Definitely, that's not what we're supposed to put on the facade of success and power. But oh yes, angles. But when you have that vulnerability, I think it's really powerful. So I applaud you.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do a lot of that.
Thank you. I would applaud you back, but I'd spill my tea everywhere. So, but I'm doing it in my mind, applauding like this.
Oh, well, you texted me, if you don't mind me cutting you off, it's right here. I wanted to talk about something because I don't want to take up all of your time. You texted me like half an hour ago, and I thought it was a really interesting question. So I want to focus on it, if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's go for
it. So you wrote me, let me find it. So you had a process question. You said, I'm curious about your mindset, thoughts, attitude when you're painting the abstract layer, and then when you're painting the representative. Are you conscious of it, and does it change? And I think it's a great question, not just for me, but for you as well, because we do kind of a similar thing. We have this like very abstract here. Let me see if I can zoom out because I've got a painting behind me. Like this very abstract layer. Well, I cannot Vanna White this right now. And then we kind of build from there, right? We kind of, at least, and I'll talk about my process, and then I want to hear about your process, because I think we're doing something similar, but we may not be. So for me, I don't like the perfection of raw canvas. It freaks me the hell out. So I do an abstract layer. I don't even know what I'm painting on it most times. I just like have these moments of just like swash and color and melting, and it's beautiful, and I love paint, and it's very like how I imagine like maybe Jackson Pollock paints. I don't know. It's very emotional, and it's just like color. And then I have, I think about what I want to paint and da. So those two operations are separate. So I do the abstract. I have no idea what I'm doing. And then I'm like, oh, I want to talk about self-worth or my body image or whatever it is, or systemic racism. Sure, why not? And and then I'm kind of thinking, well, as you do.
Throw it all in
there. They're hard things to think about, but worthwhile. And then I kind of come up with an image, what I want to say and how I want to say it. And then I kind of fix the canvas that I abstractly messed up. And I like to work this way because I fall into the trap of like the perfect stroke. I want it to be perfect the first time. And when I work this way, there's no, what's the word I'm looking for? There's no ego involved. I'm just fixing something I spilled a bunch of paint on. And that's what works for me. But how about you? How do you approach your work?
Yeah, I just want to respond to what you said first.
Go ahead.
Describe mine, because I think that duality is really interesting, of having that kind of more free form, like unplanned abstraction, and then coming into it later with your like more technical skills of an analytical mind of like, how am I going to make this? What am I making? So I think that duality is really nice. And that's actually recognizing that in your work is the reason why I asked you the question. Because it sounds like you kind of answered it. What I was really interested in is because you just identified like a bit of perfectionism, right? Like with wanting the line to be perfect. So when you do the abstraction, does any of that thinking come in? Like, is there a part of you, or is it easy to get into that free flow, non-judgmental space, or does sometimes that even affect the abstract?
I mean, in terms of like, I want a purity of color, like muddiness on a canvas. I hate the muddiness. So, there is like, and now after years of doing this, there's like a process to it. But I like seeing the hand in it, and the hand is not always perfect. Like when I try and make a straight line on a giant canvas and it got a little wobble, like I like that wobble because it's me. Do you know what I'm saying? And I like for me, honestly, as someone who is a high functioning, anxiety ridden woman, letting go and just painting is actually like, that's the juiciest part. And I obviously I love the technical part. Like I love, oh, that's a beautiful eye, and I did that, and then there's color here. And I like that part, But yeah, the part where you're just like freeform splashing paint. One day I will have a studio where I could just like throw buckets on the canvas and I will be the happiest woman in the world. Where I'm not trying to be clean.
Oh, I feel that so much. Yeah, that like it's funny how even something that might be a small restriction, like an awareness of being messy, can actually affect the work as well. So having that freedom to just let go is like so important.
And we don't get that opportunity, especially for, yeah, if you're renting the house, you don't you don't want to ruin it.
Yeah.
So
I've never had a separate studio. I've always worked out of my bedroom. So you can put tarps down, you can try and cover things, but there's a limitation really. And like you can't really go for that full on, like this is just a messy art space where everything's gonna get really messed up.
The few
So
times,
yeah, that's definitely something I think about as well.
well, the few times I've gotten to do that, and you do a lot of these, is when I do mural work. When I'm outside and it's like concrete and the person's like, I don't care about splashes, that is like, oh,
Yeah.
so
When they say they don't care about splashes, but honestly, it affects me even when I'm outside because I'm like, oh, I don't want to get paint on the sidewalk. I don't want to get the building next to it.
I mean, I'm kind of bad. I'm like, this is what you get if you get a the Tracy Piper painting.
I'm a painter. I put paint everywhere. This is what I do.
This is for being an artist.
I don't want to go on too much of a tangent because we had a topic, but honestly, I like really use that idea of the artist so much in my life. Like, I'm late, I'm disorganized, I'm an artist. It doesn't matter.
You know, we got to use what we can because it ain't easy. Oh,
Just enabling myself with my bad behavior. Like, it's okay. I'm an artist.
I mean, I'm an artist. I'm making a mess. Just get used to it.
This is what it is.
But I do want to circle back if I can. I'm actually really interested in your process because, yeah, go ahead.
So, well, I guess there's a lot of aspects to it, but specifically what we were talking about, this abstract, like representational mix, is that you're completely right that I think our work has a lot of similarities in that. So these ones actually not because they're a bit different, but usually my process is spray paint, abstract mess, and the same thing. I'm trying not to think. I'm just trying to be like whatever, especially recently. And then afterwards I come in and I think of it as carving out a face. It's like I'm going into this paint and I'm like carving a face out of what was there before and having this interplay between this like chaotic abstraction and then the tight realism is like really satisfying to me. So I've also been doing that, but what I found, and I found this through therapy, it's something me and my therapist have been discussing, is that I wasn't really fully engaging in the abstraction with a lot of my fears and my insecurities and my like hang-ups from trauma and various things like that. In that with spray paint, it's super fast. So I could literally do it in like a few minutes. So there really isn't time for me to allow those thoughts to come in that start saying things like, this isn't going to be any good. What are you doing? This should be different. Like this doesn't mean anything. And like all of these like kind of restrictive thoughts that end up coming in. And so recently I've been trying to engage with that more and become like way more conscious of it. And that's why my question was phrased as like, what is your mindset when you're doing it? Because I think as someone who also has some of the same challenges that I do in terms of that criticism and perfectionism and fear of failure, all those things, I was intrigued by how you've managed to find that space where you do feel this like free abstraction and you don't have those thoughts come in. Because for me, what I've been like doing in my life, like not just with painting, but with everything in my life, is to really acknowledge like where I have been avoidant, where I've been repressing my fear, where I've been holding myself back, where I haven't been trying new things because of this fear. And it's really pervasive. And like, I'm someone who probably like you is seen from the outside as being someone who's very adventurous, always doing new things, like traveling a lot or whatever.
But actually, kind of a mask.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not like how it actually feels on the inside compared to what it looks like from the outside is very different. And I have like fear has completely controlled me in a lot of ways in my life, as it does for everyone. So that was the angle that I was coming at with it, is like And today I did it. Today I like got out a load of paper. I was drawing from my imagination. I never draw from my imagination. I always have a reference. And that's part of the same thing. It's like this fear of moving away from a reference. So it's a work in process for me. And like, I think, I mean, I love realism, but I really see that as I continue to explore this, that my work is going to change a lot, because I am interested in like challenging this part of myself that is afraid of this unknown and kind of holds on to the safety of realism, the safety of references, the safety of, you know, a fast process, so then you don't have time to think. So that's really like my vibe at the moment, and that's what motivated the question.
It's interesting though, because when you say that fast moment, I do the same thing. The backgrounds are done very quickly. Like, I'm not sitting there, you know, sipping my tea. It's like, and honestly, as a mother, I don't have a lot of time. So it's like, okay, I have literally lined canvases up. I'm like, I'm doing the blue phase, you know, and then the blue phase is done, and then it has to dry. So I'm going to go fold these laundries, and then I'm going to make dinner. And this is my problem. I like, as someone who functions with anxiety, like high functioning anxiety, I can't sit with myself, like, God forbid. So I'm like always doing something new, and okay, and then I do this stage, and then I've got my list, my to-do list, and then I'm doing that. So honestly, like, when you say like that abstract phase, you're not like sitting in and like taking the time with, I'm 100% right there with you. I don't actually, like, I'm not, like, it's luxurious. It feels luxurious to paint and like have that moment. But honestly, like, I just put on a banger, and then like, and then I'm like, yeah, Rihanna, work, you know, and then I just get it done, and then I don't think about it, you know, because that's just how I manage, I guess. I mean, yeah. And yeah, go ahead.
I think if anything that I said does resonate with you, because I don't want to make any assumptions about like how your mind works. But if any of it does, I found it has been, when you're able to find the time with your family, etc., it might be interesting to explore that, to like give yourself the time to see where your mind goes when you slow down. Because I feel like one of the things that's, I guess, always been important to me, but is, since I've been in therapy, is like I'm more consciously aware of how important it is like the parts that feel uncomfortable, the parts that I want to avoid or run away from or not think about, like those are the parts where I have the most work to do. And if I'm able to find a way to do the work with compassion in like a gentle way and a loving way, then that's going to be really valuable for me in my life, and not just for painting, but for everything. Yeah. So that's like, yeah, where I'm at the moment. And
I love it.
Yeah, I mean,
that's so good. I need that. Who's your therapist? Give me their number.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. And I stumbled on them actually from a friend who's just recommended. But because I've been doing cognitive behavioral therapy, the most common type, for like nearly 2 years now, and I feel like I'd reached this kind of stagnation. And now what I'm doing is a type of psychotherapy called internal family systems. And so that's really like, in what's motivated me is that I thought that there was a limitation to how much therapy could help me, but actually like therapy is just as diverse, and there's different models and theories, and different therapists are different. So it's like, I hear it from so many people all the time that like, oh, I tried it, it didn't help that much, or I didn't really like my therapist, and they kind of give up. And it's like, there's so much more out there, like in an inspiring way. Like if one path doesn't work, there's another one that might help, or there's another one after that. And it's also a science, it's always evolving, like they're learning new things every day. So even if it's not happening right now, in the future it could be. And I just say, I'm like ranting now, but I'm on such
I love it. I mean, and honestly, like, you know, the stigma around therapy is really difficult. And I go through phases in my life where I need a therapist. I need someone to talk to that is not connected to what's going on in my life. And I wish that therapy, at least in the US, you didn't have to spend so much money to do it, because it's necessary. Honestly, if I could afford it, I would have a therapist all the time.
Yeah,
you know, but that's part of it too, you know, not being able to afford mental health. But yeah, I mean, I think I think the more we talk about it, the more it gets normalized, and it is really important. And I think, you know, coming back to our art, it's like, even just in our art and saying like, look, I struggle with this. And then somebody sees that and they go, oh, I struggle with that too. Even that is a form of us giving back and a give and take. It's like for us, or at least for me, I can't speak for you, but for me, like if I'm doing a piece about body image or, you know, feeling overwhelmed or whatever it is, it's actually really helpful for me when people are like, oh, I see that. Oh, I do that too. It's like that connection, that moment of like, we're all struggling. I don't know, it makes it better.
Yeah, I 100% think so, and that's actually why I talk about it so much, like in my work, but also when I do interviews like this or with my own series, like mental health often topic, because it does matter. So it like consciousness and awareness is so important. Like you can't take any steps afterwards until you're able to recognize it, talk about it, feel okay to talk about it, and like you acknowledge the stigma, and like stigmas exist for so many categories of things that people struggle with. So yeah, I think like conversation and discussion, all of that is like a huge step. But yeah.
Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Is there anything, because we have a lot of people who watch who are just coming into being an artist. Do you have any advice for them? Anything you want to say to the people out there on the internet?
Hey people, how's it going? Yeah, I mean, I'm not on any kind of time deadlines because we're locked down.
Oh, I know. I love
but
it.
but I definitely appreciate the understanding there. Yeah, I think so. I think for people who want to go into art full time, or maybe they're like starting out with it, I think what am I biggest vibing on right now? Definitely like I think it's most valuable when you use it as an opportunity to explore the things that you're interested in. So whatever it is, even if you think it's too weird or other people won't like it or like there's no market for it, just move towards like what is compelling to you, because I think that even if you don't understand it right now, maybe in a year's time, you'll be like, oh, that's what I was trying to process. That's why I was interested in this thing. So just really like listen to your gut or your heart or your inner child, whatever you want to call it.
Oh, oh no, I lost him. Well, that was great advice from our friend David Puck. That's too bad we lost him because that was really good, but we were wrapping it up anyway. Anyway, if you have a chance to check out his work, David Puck Artist, I think is at David Puck Artist. He's on Instagram, he's on Facebook. His Painterview series is amazing, and I'm sure we'll check in with him again. He's just such a love. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.